"Blake, you're not my real son, so I'm cutting off all financial support as of today." David Richardson's words echoed through the crowded Westfield High School gymnasium like a cannon shot. 400 people, classmates, families, teachers, fell silent. Even the baby crying in the third row stopped making noise. I stood halfway to the stage, my name still ringing through the speakers after being called up to receive my diploma. Instead of applause and camera flashes, I received the most devastating public humiliation of my life. My name is Blake, and at 18 years old, I have just been disowned by my adoptive father in front of the entire community. But while David thought he was destroying me with his calculated and cruel statement, he didn't realize one fundamental thing. I already knew exactly how this story would end. "I have no obligation to pay for college for someone who isn't related to me," David continued, his voice steady as if he were giving a corporate report. He was in the fourth row, arms crossed, posture confident. "It's time you learned about the real world." Lisa, his wife of 3 years, desperately tugged at his blazer sleeve, whispering something I couldn't hear. Her face had turned pale as a sheet. The 8-month-old baby in her arms, supposedly my half-brother Ethan, began to cry again, as if he could sense the tension in the air. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Phones turned in our direction, recording every second of this family catastrophe. Tomorrow it would be all over social media, boy rejected by father at graduation. Except they had no idea what was really going on. I should have run out of that gym in tears. I should have been devastated, humiliated, broken. That's what David expected. That's what everyone expected. Instead, I smiled. It wasn't a sad or forced smile. It was a genuine smile, the kind my adoptive mother Catherine used to say lit up my whole face before she died of cancer 4 years ago. Because David had just given me the perfect opening. "Well," I said, loud enough for the microphone to pick up my voice, "since we're sharing family secrets." I walked up to the podium instead of going straight to the diploma table. The principal tried to direct me to the correct spot, but I shook my head gently. "I need to say something," I announced, adjusting the microphone. The gym grew so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. Every person was leaning forward, waiting to see how this bizarre situation would unfold. I reached into my graduation folder and pulled out a white envelope, the same envelope I had been carrying with me for 2 weeks, waiting for this exact moment. "David is right," I began, looking directly at him. "I'm not his biological son. I've known that my whole life. Catherine told me when I was 12, and she made sure I understood how loved and wanted I was." David's confident posture faltered slightly. This wasn't going according to the script he had planned. "But since we're talking about DNA and family secrets," I continued, holding the envelope, "let me share something interesting about genetics." Lisa wasn't just pale anymore, she was gray. She shook her head frantically, whispering no over and over. The baby was still crying, but she didn't even seem to notice. "You know," I said, opening the envelope slowly, deliberately, "sometimes the people who throw rocks live in the most fragile glass houses." The sound of paper being opened echoed impossibly loud in the silent gym. "Your son, that precious baby you've been showing off for the last 8 months, is not biologically yours, David." The explosion of whispers and gasps was immediate. People stood up, craning their necks to get a better look. Phones recorded from every angle. "Lisa has been having an affair with your brother Michael for over a year," I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "The baby she's holding right now is your nephew, not your son." David's legs gave way. He collapsed back into his chair as if someone had cut his strings. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Lisa made a choking sound and rushed for the exit, still carrying the baby. She was literally running, tripping over the rows of chairs in her high designer heels. "I have the DNA test results right here," I said, waving the papers. 99.9% certainty. Your brother Michael is the biological father of the child." The gym erupted into total chaos. People were talking over each other, pointing, standing up on their chairs to get a better view. My classmates on stage were frozen, their own graduations forgotten in favor of this unexpected drama. But I wasn't finished. If this story of revenge and justice touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see how the most humiliating experience of my life turned into the perfect opportunity to expose the truth that would change everything forever. Because what David didn't know was that for 3 long months, I had meticulously collected every piece of evidence of his betrayal. And I was about to reveal secrets that would destroy not only his marriage, but the entire carefully constructed image he had created. "Oh, and Lisa," I shouted as she stumbled over chairs trying to escape, "you might want to be more careful where you leave your hotel receipts and jewelry. Especially that bracelet that belonged to my mother." The heavy gym doors slammed behind her with a sound that echoed like thunder. Lisa was gone, but David remained seated like a broken statue, staring at me as if he had never seen me before. His face had gone from confident to confused to completely shattered in a matter of minutes. But to understand how we got here, you need to know the real story of David Richardson, the man who spent 3 years making me believe I was a burden on his life, when in fact he was the one being deceived. David had always been a controlling man. Even when Catherine was alive, he treated our family like a corporate project. Dinner was a meeting where I was expected to report grades and activities. Holidays were events planned with military precision. Our house felt more like a showroom than a home. Catherine softened all of that. She was my safe haven in a house that often felt more like an expensive hotel. When she died of cancer 4 years ago, I didn't just lose a mother, I lost my emotional translator, the only person who could get David to show genuine affection. The change was immediate. Without Catherine to smooth his rough edges, David became even more distant. Dinner became silent sessions where he checked his email while I ate alone. Conversations were reduced to grunts of approval or disapproval about my report cards. Then Lisa came along. 6 months after Catherine's funeral, David brought Lisa home. She was everything Catherine wasn't: cold, calculating, polished like a mannequin. Where my mother wore comfortable sweaters and always smelled like homemade cookies, Lisa wore tailored suits and expensive perfumes that cost more than my annual allowance. "You must be the son," she said the first time we met, as if I were a curious piece of furniture rather than a grieving teenager. David married her 8 months later. Small ceremony, just immediate family and a few business associates. I wore the black suit Catherine had bought me for formal events, and Lisa made passive-aggressive comments about my goth phase to anyone who would listen. The house changed after Lisa moved in. Catherine's vanilla candles were replaced by expensive diffusers that smelled like a department store. His cozy reading nooks became display areas for Lisa's crystal figurine collection. Even the family photos changed. Our pictures with Catherine were discreetly relocated to less prominent positions, replaced by professional portraits of David and Lisa that looked like they belonged in a magazine. Then came the pregnancy announcement. I was 16, sitting at the breakfast table with a bowl of cereal, when Lisa placed her hand on her still flat belly and smiled that perfect smile. "We're having a baby," she announced as if she were commenting on the weather. David's face lit up in a way I had never seen before. Pure joy, genuine excitement, the kind of expression I had spent years hoping to inspire. He picked Lisa up in his arms, spinning her around the kitchen as she laughed and protested that he would make her dizzy. I sat there, spoon halfway to my mouth, watching this display of happiness that had nothing to do with me. "This is our second chance," David said later that night, his hand resting protectively on Lisa's stomach. "Our chance to get it right." The implication was clear. I had been practical, a rehearsal. This baby would be the real thing. That's when I started to pull away. I spent more time at the library, staying until closing and walking home through quiet neighborhoods where I could think. I got a part-time job at a local bookstore, partly for the money, but mostly for the excuse to be somewhere else. The baby arrived on a Tuesday in March. A boy, perfect and healthy, with dark hair and curious eyes. They named him Ethan, and David cried, happy tears this time. He held his son as if he were made of crystal, whispering promises about all the things they would do together, all the ways he would be a good father. I watched from the hospital room door, invisible as always, and wondered if he had ever held me like that when I was little. But it was during those late-night visits to the hospital that I noticed something strange. Michael, David's younger brother, seemed to spend a lot of time at the hospital. More time than most uncles. He brought flowers, expensive gifts, and always found excuses to hold the baby when David wasn't around. Michael owned a successful technology company and had never married or had children of his own. He was charming, wealthy, and had always been Lisa's favorite topic of conversation at family dinners. Too favorite, perhaps. The pieces slowly began to fit together, like a puzzle I didn't want to solve. Late-night phone calls that Lisa ended abruptly when someone entered the room. Shopping trips where she came home with bags from stores Michael had mentioned. The way she lit up when his name came up in conversation, quickly trying to hide her reaction. 3 months after Ethan was born, I should have been asleep when I heard Lisa talking on the phone in the kitchen. It was past midnight, and she was whispering, but the sound carried in our old house. I told Michael to stop sending gifts here, she was saying. David is getting suspicious about how much attention you're giving the baby. My blood ran cold. I know you want to be involved, Lisa continued, but we have to be careful. At least until Ethan is older. Then maybe we can figure out how to tell him the truth about his real father. That night, Lisa had sealed her fate. What she didn't know was that for 3 months, I had meticulously documented every piece of evidence of her betrayal, building a case that couldn't be denied. Because part of me was already forming a plan, a way to use this information when the time was right. When David finally pushed me too far. As it turned out, graduation day was exactly that moment. But what David didn't know was how many secrets I had uncovered, and how devastating the consequences would be when I finally decided to share them with the world. During that midnight phone call that changed everything, I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I lay in the dark, processing every word Lisa had whispered, trying to decide what to do with the information that had just fallen into my lap. Part of me wanted to run downstairs immediately and confront them. Another part wanted to call David right then and tell him everything. But a third part, the part that had learned to survive in a home where affection was rationed, told me to be patient. To gather more evidence. To build an irrefutable case. It was that third voice that prevailed. And it was also on that night that I made the decision that would change the course of my life. If David ever tried to throw me out, I would have the tools to destroy the perfect world he thought he had built. Lisa's behavior became even more brazen after that phone call. It was as if verbalizing her secret made her feel safer, more secure. She began going out more often, always with elaborate excuses about social engagements or doctor's appointments for the baby. I have to take Ethan to the pediatrician today, she would announce at breakfast, wearing a dress that cost more than my annual allowance. It might take a few hours. David would just grunt his approval, already focused on his morning emails. But I started to notice the details. Lisa would come home with expensive shopping bags but never mention going to the stores. Her hair was always perfectly styled, as if she'd just left the salon, but she never talked about trips to the hairdresser. And there was a sparkle in her eyes, the kind of satisfaction that comes from secret adventures. Michael stepped up his visits, too. He used to show up for family dinners once or twice a month. Now he was always around. Just came to see my nephew, he would say, picking up Ethan with a familiarity that went beyond typical uncle affection. David was proud of the attention Michael gave the baby. It's nice to see how much you care about the family, he would say to his brother. Ethan is lucky to have an uncle like you. If only he knew. The situation took a turn for the worse when David decided it was time to toughen up on me. Lisa had planted poisonous seeds in his head about my ungratefulness and distant behavior. Blake needs to learn responsibility, she said during a dinner party, gently rocking Ethan as she spoke. I was working and paying my own bills by the time I was 18. Lisa's right, David agreed, looking at me with that clinical expression I knew so well. You've been spoiled. It's time to grow up. So the rules began. Curfew at 9 p.m. No car on weekends. Curfew at 9. No using the car on weekends. Extra chores that Lisa invented daily. Clean the basement, she would order. Organize the garage. Wash the windows inside and out. Each order came with that sweet smile that didn't reach her eyes. The worst were the family dinners when Michael was present. Lisa turned into an exaggerated version of a devoted wife, constantly touching David's arm, laughing too loudly at his jokes, and showering Ethan with maternal affection. But I saw how her eyes darted to Michael when David wasn't looking. I saw how Michael held Ethan for unnecessarily long periods of time, whispering things to the baby that no one else could hear. During one of these grotesque scenes, I made my second big decision. I would no longer be a passive observer. I would be an active documenter. I started small. A discreet photo of Michael holding Ethan protectively. An audio recording of Lisa lying about where she had spent the afternoon. Screenshots of the strange times she checked her phone. Then I discovered that our home security system recorded more than David realized. David had installed cameras throughout the house after a string of neighborhood burglaries. It's for our protection, he explained. But what he didn't realize was that the system automatically archived all recordings to a cloud server, and I had memorized the password when the technician set it up in front of me. 3 months of recordings gave me a treasure trove of evidence. Lisa on the phone whispering declarations of love to someone who was clearly not David. Michael visiting during the day when David was at work, entering with his own key. Intimate moments between them in our living room, on our couch, while Ethan slept in his stroller nearby. But the most devastating evidence came from Lisa herself. In an April recording, Lisa was alone with Ethan in the kitchen when the baby started crying. She picked him up, rocking him gently, and began to sing a lullaby. But in the middle of the song, she stopped and whispered, "Sure, my love. Daddy Michael is coming to visit you tomorrow. We just have to keep our secret for a little while longer." She kissed the baby on the forehead and continued, "When you grow up, you'll understand why Mommy had to do this. David is a good man, but he's not your real father. Your real father loves you very, very much." That recording made me feel physically sick. Not just because of the obvious betrayal, but because of the calculated coldness with which Lisa had manipulated all of us. David, who genuinely believed he was raising his first biological child. Ethan, who would grow up in a web of lies from the cradle. And me, who was being systematically pushed out of the family to make room for Lisa's real children. It was at that moment that I made my third and most important decision. When the time came, and I knew it would, I wouldn't just reveal the truth. I would completely destroy the facade Lisa had built. My opportunity came sooner than I expected. David had become increasingly critical of my college plans. "Do you really think you deserve Columbia?" he asked during a tense breakfast. "There are perfectly adequate state colleges for someone with your grades." Lisa nodded in agreement. "David's right, Blake. You need to be more realistic about your options." But it was the conversation I overheard between them 3 weeks before graduation that sealed the fate of both of them. I was climbing the stairs when I heard tense voices coming from their bedroom. The door was ajar, and the words came to me with crystal clarity. "You can't really be considering cutting off his college fund," Lisa was saying, but her tone wasn't one of concern, it was one of barely concealed relief. "Why not?" David replied. "He's not my blood. I fulfilled my obligation by providing a home and a basic education. Now it's time for him to learn how to support himself." "And when are you going to break it to him?" "At graduation. Public, definitive, no room for emotional manipulation later." Lisa laughed, a low, satisfied laugh. "Well, that certainly solves our problem. With Blake out of the way, Ethan can grow up being the only child, as he should be." That night, I sat on my bed holding all the files I had collected. Months of meticulously documented evidence. Recordings, photos, receipts, transcribed conversations. A complete and irrefutable case against Lisa and Michael. David thought he was kicking me out of a family that never really wanted me. What he didn't know was that he was about to discover that the family he thought he had built was a lie from the beginning. As I organized the evidence in chronological order, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: complete control over my own destiny. At graduation, David would have his moment of calculated public humiliation. But I would have my complete and devastating revenge. And unlike his carefully constructed lies, every word I said would be absolutely true. The only question that remained was, would David survive the complete collapse of his reality? Because when I finished exposing all the secrets Lisa thought she had buried, there would be nothing left of the perfect world he thought he had. From that conversation about cutting off my college fund, I knew I had 3 weeks to build an irrefutable case. 3 weeks to gather evidence that would not only prove the case, but completely devastate him. Getting DNA samples was easier than I thought. Michael came over for dinner every Sunday, as he always did. During one of those visits in April, while he was playing with Ethan in the living room, I collected a few strands of hair from the bathroom he used. David's hair came from his brush in the master bathroom, easy enough when Lisa was busy with the baby. Ethan's sample was more complicated, but babies drool constantly. I waited until Lisa left a pacifier on the coffee table and discreetly tucked it into a plastic bag. Finding a DNA lab that would work with a minor was the biggest challenge. Most required parental consent or legal documentation. But I found a small private lab across town that asked fewer questions when I paid cash and explained it was for a school science project. The technician, a tired woman in her 50s, barely glanced at my samples. "Standard paternity test," she confirmed. "Results in 2 to 3 weeks. You'll get a call when they're ready." Those 3 weeks were torture. Every day I watched Lisa play her perfect wife and devoted mother charade. I watched David melt with pride over his son. I watched Michael visit way too often and hold Ethan for unnecessarily long periods of time. Meanwhile, I gathered more evidence. Hotel receipts Lisa dropped from her purse. Strange call logs on the landline. Expensive jewelry that appeared on her wrist, including that bracelet I recognized immediately as having belonged to Catherine. That bracelet angered me more than anything else. David had given it to Michael to keep after Catherine's death, saying he wanted to preserve her memory in the family. Seeing Lisa wearing a symbol of my mother's love as a trophy of her betrayal was the moment any hesitation I still had disappeared completely. David, meanwhile, was growing increasingly confident about his plans for graduation. During dinners, he would make comments about personal responsibility and learning to support yourself. Lisa would smile and agree, her eyes shining with barely concealed satisfaction. 18 is old enough to be independent, she would say, tucking Ethan into her lap. It's time for Blake to build his own life. If you're rooting for this careful strategy and search for the truth to result in justice, subscribe to the channel, because you haven't seen anything yet. The call from the lab came on a Thursday afternoon. I was at work at the bookstore when my phone rang. Mr. Richardson? Your results are ready for pickup. My hand shook as I hung up. This was the moment of truth. Once I saw those results, there would be no turning back. There would be no pretending I didn't know what I knew. I drove to the lab after work, my stomach in knots. Linda handed me a sealed envelope with my name on it. The results are pretty conclusive, she said, but I couldn't read her expression. I sat in my car in the lab parking lot, staring at the envelope. Part of me wanted to rip it open right then and there. Another part wanted to throw it away and pretend none of this had happened. Instead, I drove home and hid the envelope in my copy of Catherine's Jane Eyre, her favorite book, which she had read to me countless times when I was little. It seemed fitting to hide evidence of one family's secrets inside a story about another orphan girl trying to find her place in the world. I didn't open the envelope that day, or that week. Because some instinct told me I was saving it for something. For a moment when I would need the perfect weapon. That moment came on graduation morning, when I heard David and Lisa planning my public humiliation downstairs. Perfect timing, David was saying. Public, final, no room for emotional manipulation. Lisa laughed softly. Well, that will certainly solve our little problem. With Blake out of the way, Ethan can grow up as the only child. That morning, I finally opened the envelope. 99.9% certain. Michael was Ethan's biological father. I sat on my bed, holding the results, and felt something I hadn't felt in years, complete control over my own destiny. David thought he was setting me up for an ambush at graduation. He had no idea he was walking right into mine. As I dressed carefully that morning, not for him but for myself, I tucked the DNA results into my graduation folder, right next to the speech I knew I would never give. David would have his moment of calculated public humiliation. But when it was over, there would be nothing left of the perfect world he thought he had built. And the best part? Every word I was about to say would be absolutely true. The only question left was whether David would survive the complete collapse of the reality he thought he knew. Because when I finished exposing all the secrets Lisa had buried, his entire life would be revealed as a lie built on betrayal and manipulation. The drive to school was tense. David drove with that determined expression I knew so well, the same one he wore before important meetings where he planned to dismantle competitors. Lisa was fidgety in the passenger seat, compulsively adjusting the rearview mirror and checking her makeup for the 5th time. Are you okay? David asked her, but his tone suggested the question was more polite than genuine. Just nervous about the speech, Lisa lied softly, rocking Ethan on her lap. I want everything to be perfect for Blake. The irony was so thick I almost choked. Lisa was nervous, but not for the reason David imagined. She knew something was wrong. Women who live lies develop keen instincts for detecting when other people may be hiding secrets too. In the Westfield High School gym, I watched David choose our seats strategically. 4th row, center, close enough to be seen, far enough away to make a discreet exit. He settled in with his arms crossed, checking his phone repeatedly, like an executive waiting for a presentation he knew he would completely dominate. Lisa sat down next to him, her fingers drumming nervously on the strap of her purse. Ethan was fidgety, as if he could feel the tension in the air. Other parents around us laughed and took pictures, the typical energy of a graduation ceremony filling the space. David had no idea he was about to become the center of a drama that would destroy his life in a matter of minutes. The ceremony began normally. The principal gave a speech about new beginnings and endless possibilities. The valedictorian spoke about pursuing dreams and overcoming obstacles. I barely heard the words. My focus was entirely on David, watching for any sign of what was to come. When they began calling names in alphabetical order, the atmosphere in the gym became electric. Each graduate had his moment celebrated with applause, shouts of encouragement, and camera flashes. It was beautiful and exciting, exactly how a graduation should be. Then it was my turn. Blake Richardson. I stood up, smoothed my cap, and began the walk toward the stage. The gymnasium settled into that respectful silence that accompanies each graduate's moment. That's when David stood up. Not to applaud. Not to shout with pride. He stood up as if he were about to make a corporate announcement. Blake is not my real son, his voice cut through the silence like a knife, so I am cutting off all financial support as of today. The gym erupted in shocked murmurs and gasps. People turned in their seats, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Phones moved toward us, already recording. I have no obligation to pay for college for someone who isn't related to me, David continued, completely confident. It's time for him to learn what real life is like. Lisa was frantically pulling at his sleeve, whispering, "David, no, not like this," but he ignored her completely. Ethan started to cry, probably feeling the tension, but David was so focused on his moment of power that he didn't even notice. What he also didn't notice was my smile. I walked straight to the podium instead of the diploma table. The principal tried to direct me to the correct spot, but I shook my head gently. "I need to respond to this," I said, adjusting the microphone. The gym was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. 400 people leaned forward, waiting to see how this bizarre situation would unfold. I took the envelope out of my graduation folder, the same envelope I had carried around for 2 weeks, waiting for this exact moment. "David is absolutely right," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the microphone. "I am not his biological son. I've known this my entire life. Catherine told me when I was 12, and she made sure I understood how loved and wanted I was." David's confident posture began to falter. This wasn't the script he had planned. He had expected tears, humiliation, a silent retreat. Not this. "But since we're sharing family secrets about DNA," I continued, holding the envelope, "perhaps it's only fair that everyone knows the whole truth." Lisa wasn't just pale anymore, she was gray. She shook her head frantically, whispering no over and over. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped Ethan. "You see," I said, opening the envelope slowly, "sometimes the people who throw rocks live in the most fragile glass houses." The sound of the paper being opened echoed impossibly loud in the silent gym. "Your son, that precious baby you've been showing off for the last 8 months, is not biologically yours, David." The explosion was immediate. People gasped, screamed, stood up to get a better look. Cell phones recorded from every angle. Chaos was breaking out, but I wasn't finished. "Lisa has been having an affair with your brother Michael for over a year," I continued, my voice cutting through the noise. "The baby she's holding right now is your nephew, not your son." David slumped back into his chair as if someone had cut his legs out from under him. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The transformation on his face was spectacular, confidence turning to confusion, confusion turning to horror, horror turning to devastating understanding. Lisa made a strangled sound and rushed toward the exit, still carrying Ethan. She was actually running, tripping over people's feet, her high heels hitting the gym floor like gunshots. "I have the DNA test results right here," I announced, waving the official papers. 99.9% certainty. Michael Richardson is the biological father of this child. The gym descended into complete chaos. People shouted questions, pointed, stood on chairs to get a better view. My colleagues on stage were frozen, their own graduations forgotten. But I wasn't done with my presentation yet. "Oh, and Lisa," I shouted, even though she was already halfway out the doors, "you might want to be more careful about where you leave your hotel receipts, your jewelry bills, and especially that bracelet that belonged to my mother." The heavy doors slammed behind her with a sound like thunder. I turned to David, who was staring at me as if he'd never seen me before. His face had gone from confident to devastated in a matter of minutes. "You wanted to cut me off," I said, my voice still carrying through the microphone. "You wanted to humiliate me publicly. You wanted to make sure everyone knew I wasn't really part of your family." I walked to the edge of the stage, looking directly at him. "Well, congratulations. You just gave me the perfect opportunity to return the favor." The crowd was in a frenzy now. People were recording, taking pictures, already posting on social media. This would go viral in an hour. By tomorrow, the entire town would know that David Richardson, successful businessman and pillar of the community, had been cheated on by his own wife and brother. I tucked the DNA results back into my briefcase and walked up to the diploma table. The principal, looking completely overwhelmed, handed me my diploma with trembling hands. "Congratulations, Mr. Richardson," he whispered. "Thank you," I replied, posing for the official photo as if nothing had happened. "It's been a memorable day." As I walked off the stage, diploma in hand, I could hear David behind me. He was shouting my name, his voice cracked and desperate. "Blake. Wait. Please, we need to talk." But I didn't turn around. I didn't stop walking. I had spent 18 years waiting for his approval, his acceptance, his love. I had spent months planning for this exact moment, knowing that sooner or later he would try to push me out of his life. I just never expected him to make it this easy. The trap he had set for me, the calculated public humiliation, the strategic cruelty, had backfired spectacularly. He wanted to quietly discard me, make me disappear without a fuss. Instead, he gave me the perfect stage for my revenge. And the best part? Every word I said was true. The DNA test, the affair, the hotel receipts, I had proof of everything. Months of careful investigation, of following Lisa, of collecting evidence. David thought he was so smart, so strategic. He thought he could manipulate me the same way he manipulated everyone else in his life. He was wrong. As I pushed open the gym doors, I could still hear the chaos behind me. People shouting questions, phones ringing, the principal desperately trying to restore order. But I was done with all of it. Done with David, done with his fake family, done with pretending to be grateful for crumbs of affection. I had my diploma, my scholarship to Columbia, and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the best revenge is simply the truth. The parking lot was almost empty. Everyone was still inside, glued to their seats by the drama. I walked to my beat-up Honda, threw my cap in the back seat, and started the engine. In my rearview mirror, I could see people starting to file out of the gym, talking excitedly, phones glued to their ears. I smiled again and drove away. Let them talk. Let the whole town talk. I was finally free. But the real question was, would David survive the complete collapse of the reality he thought he knew? Because when the dust settled, there would be nothing left of the perfect world he thought he had. 3 months after graduation, David had lost everything. His divorce from Lisa was finalized in record time. She disappeared with Ethan and was never seen in town again. Michael tried to deny everything until the evidence became undeniable. He lost his most important contracts when the story spread through business circles. David was left alone in the house where there had once been a family. That's when he showed up at my apartment door, unrecognizable. His hair was messy, his suit was wrinkled, and his eyes were red from exhaustion. "Blake," his voice was broken. "I need to talk to you." We sat on the small patio behind the building. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. "You were right to expose me," he said finally. "I just wish I had protected you before. I wish I had been the father you deserved instead of the coward I was." For the first time in my life, I saw David truly cry. Not tears of self-pity, but of genuine regret. "Can I forgive you?" he asked, his voice barely audible. I thought of Catherine, of her words about choosing love over fear. I thought of all the anger I had carried and how it had only kept me stuck in the past. "Yes," I replied simply. "I forgive you." The forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for me. It was about choosing what kind of person I wanted to be. Today, 2 years later, David and I have dinner together once a month. He's in therapy, working to become a better person. We're not a perfect family, but we're real. I've discovered that the best revenge isn't destroying someone, it's refusing to let their pain destroy you. It's building a life so full that the past loses its power to define you. If this story of overcoming adversity and making choices has touched you, subscribe to the channel for more stories about turning the worst experiences into opportunities for growth. Because sometimes, the people who hurt us the most are the ones who need forgiveness the most. And sometimes, giving that forgiveness is what finally sets us free. The truth always wins. And love is always stronger than revenge.